She came as contract bride to a dying man. His Cowboy Foreman said, "Stay after he's gone." Clara Reynolds had never seen a ranch as big as the Dawson estate. Rolling fields stretched farther than she could see, dotted with horses grazing under the wide, open sky. The sun hung low in the late afternoon, painting the hills in soft gold, and a warm breeze carried the faint smell of hay and earth. She stepped down from the wagon, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and curiosity. This was not the life she had imagined for herself, but she had a promise to keep, a contract she could not break. Her father had explained it many times during their long ride. "Henry Dawson is a sick man, Clara. He needs companionship, someone to care for him. It's only for a short time, and it will secure your future. Think of it as a stepping stone." Clara had listened, but her thoughts had been elsewhere. She had grown up in a small town, helping her mother run a modest store, and she had never imagined leaving for a place this vast, this alive with work and responsibility. As she walked toward the main house, the front porch loomed large before her, its wood weathered but strong. The house had stood there for generations, a symbol of stability and endurance. Clara felt a sudden wave of nervousness. She straightened her back, smoothed her dress, and took a deep breath. There was no turning back now. She knocked lightly at the door, and it swung open before she could wait for an answer. Henry Dawson sat in a high-backed chair near the window, the afternoon sun falling on his graying hair. He was thinner than Clara had imagined, his skin pale, his hands resting weakly on the armrests. There was a quiet dignity about him, though, a strength that seemed to linger despite his illness. When he looked at her, his eyes were kind but tired. "Clara Reynolds, I presume," he said in a voice soft but deliberate. "Welcome to Dawson Ranch." "Thank you, sir," Clara replied, her voice a little shaky. She noticed how fragile he looked, and for the first time a pang of pity rose in her chest. This was not a man who could fight off the hardships of life alone anymore. She had a duty to him, and that knowledge filled her with both apprehension and resolve. Henry studied her quietly for a moment. "You've come a long way," he said. "I appreciate that. I am not much of a talker, but I hope we can make these months bearable for both of us." Clara nodded. "I hope so too, sir." It was then that she met Jed Harper. He had been standing just behind the porch, hands resting on the railing. His eyes were sharp and observant, taking in every detail of her arrival. Jed was tall, with broad shoulders and sun-darkened skin, and there was an ease to his movements that suggested years spent working in the open air. He tipped his hat to her but said nothing. His silence carried a quiet authority, the kind that only comes from knowing a place inside and out. "You'll meet the ranch soon enough," Henry said, giving her a faint, encouraging smile. "Jed here will show you around. He's as much a part of this place as any of us. Listen to him, he knows everything that needs knowing." Jed nodded again, this time speaking. "Come on, Miss Reynolds, I'll show you the stables first. Then you can meet the rest of the crew. We don't bite and we work hard. If you can keep up, you'll do fine." Clara followed him hesitantly. Her eyes were wide as they moved past the porch and down a dirt path that led to the barns. Horses neighed softly in the distance, their heads turning as they sensed new company. The barn doors were open, revealing hay-strewn floors and the faint smell of leather and oats. Jed moved like he belonged there completely, checking fences, feeding a few horses, and pointing out details that Clara barely noticed. "This one here," he said, gesturing to a chestnut mare, "is Bella. She's gentle, but she doesn't tolerate rough handling. Remember that." Clara reached out to stroke Bella's neck, feeling the warmth of the animal beneath her fingers. It was calming, grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. Jed watched silently, then nodded once. "You'll do fine if you treat them with respect." For the first time since she arrived, Clara felt a flicker of confidence. She had grown up around small animals, but horses were something entirely different, majestic and sensitive. She realized that caring for them required patience, observation, and trust, qualities she was beginning to see in herself. After the stables, Jed led her to the kitchen, where the cook, Mrs. Callahan, greeted her warmly. "You must be Clara. Henry told me to expect you. Don't worry about the cooking, I'll show you the ropes. There's more to a ranch than tending horses, you know." "Meals are a big part of keeping everyone going." Clara smiled, grateful for the kindness. The day continued in a blur of introductions, farmhands, cowboys, and a few of Henry's distant relatives who visited occasionally. Each person offered a polite nod, some a brief handshake. She felt like an outsider at first, but there was no malice, only curiosity and cautious acceptance. In the late afternoon, she returned to Henry's side. He was sitting by the window, a book resting in his lap, though he wasn't reading. "How was your tour?" he asked softly. "Interesting," Clara replied. "There's so much to learn." Henry chuckled quietly. "You'll get the hang of it. It's a different life, but it has its rewards. Patience and observation will serve you well here, and Jed will make sure you don't get lost along the way." Clara glanced at Jed, who gave her a small, reassuring smile. There was a silent understanding in that look. She wasn't alone. Despite the weight of the contract, the unfamiliar surroundings, and the uncertainty of her future, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Perhaps this place could become something more than a temporary arrangement. As evening approached, the ranch took on a softer tone. The wind rustled through the grass, and the sun dipped behind the hills, leaving streaks of pink and orange in the sky. Clara found herself on the porch, watching Henry rest quietly inside, the sounds of the ranch fading into a peaceful hum. Jed joined her, leaning against the railing. "Long day, Miss Reynolds," he said. "It's a lot to take in, I know, but give it time. This ranch, it has a way of teaching you things about yourself you never knew." Clara nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had come here with a contract, a promise, and a sense of duty. But already she was learning lessons of patience, resilience, and quiet courage. The ranch was more than just land and livestock. It was a place where life continued in cycles, and even a stranger could find a place within it. That night, as she lay in the modest guest room, Clara thought about the days ahead. Henry was sick, yes, but he was also a man of dignity and gentle humor. Jed was steady, capable, and trustworthy. And she herself had survived the journey here, taken the first steps into a life she hadn't chosen but could make her own. Clara closed her eyes, listening to the soft creaking of the old house and the distant whinny of a horse. Tomorrow, she would rise early, help with the chores, and continue learning. She would do her part, honor her agreement, and perhaps in time find more than she had expected, a sense of belonging, purpose, and maybe even friendship in the quiet corners of Dawson Ranch. The night passed quietly. Clara dreamed of wide-open fields, the smell of hay, and the steady rhythm of a life tied to the land. When morning came, she rose with the sun, ready to face another day. The contract might have brought her here, but something deeper was beginning to grow, a connection to a place, to people, and to a life she had never imagined. And with that thought, Clara stepped onto the porch, the wind brushing against her face, and felt the first real spark of hope. She had arrived at Dawson Ranch as a stranger, but she might just leave it with a new understanding of herself and the strength she carried quietly within her. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the Dawson Ranch, spilling warmth over the fields and waking the horses from their night's rest. Clara Reynolds rose with it, the sounds of birds calling and the distant lowing of cattle greeting her like an invitation. She dressed quickly in her simple clothes, tying her hair back into a neat braid. Today was the first day she would help with more than just observing the ranch. Today, she would work. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Mrs. Callahan, the ranch cook, was bustling about with a calm efficiency that Clara admired. "Morning, Miss Reynolds," she said cheerfully. "You'll want to eat something before heading out. Chores wait for no one, you know." Clara nodded, taking a plate of warm bread and a small cup of coffee. She ate quietly, feeling the rhythm of the household. There was an unspoken order to the ranch, a gentle but firm structure that made even newcomers feel guided, even if they weren't yet entirely sure how to move through it. She looked around the kitchen at the other workers. There were a few men and women who had been with the ranch for years, their movements confident and easy. Some smiled at her, others simply nodded, but all gave her space to find her place. When she stepped outside, the vastness of the ranch seemed even more enormous in the bright morning light. Jed Harper was waiting by the barn, his hat tipped low over his eyes as he inspected the fences. "Ready for your first full day?" he asked, voice calm but carrying a hint of challenge. "I think so," Clara replied, her stomach twisted with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Jed nodded, not pushing her. "Good, follow me and remember, patience is everything. The horses, the cattle, the land, they'll tell you what they need if you take the time to watch." Their first stop was the barn. The smell of hay, leather, and animals hit her immediately, but instead of being overwhelmed, Clara felt a strange sense of belonging. She learned to brush the horses carefully, check their hooves for cracks, and feed them in the proper order. Jed watched her closely, occasionally offering a tip or correcting her gently. His manner was never harsh, only firm enough to teach without discouraging. "You're doing well," he said after a while. "Most people stumble at first, but you seem natural." Clara's cheeks flushed. She hadn't realized how much she enjoyed working with the animals. There was a calm in it, a rhythm that matched her own heartbeat, and she found herself smiling despite the long list of tasks ahead. After the barn, they moved to the cattle pens. Jed showed her how to inspect the animals, noting their health, their behavior, and the subtle differences that could indicate trouble. Clara listened carefully, asking questions when she didn't understand. Jed answered each one with patience, impressed by her willingness to learn. As the morning passed, Clara began to feel a connection not only with the animals but with the land itself. She learned the names of the fields, the rhythm of the creek that ran through the property, and the importance of fences, gates, and grazing patterns. Everything had a purpose, and every action mattered. She began to see the ranch not just as a job, but as a living, breathing organism that required care, respect, and attention. When the chores were done for the morning, Clara returned to the main house. Henry Dawson was sitting by the window reading, his hands resting lightly on the pages. He looked up as she entered. "You're keeping busy," he said, a small smile playing at his lips. "Yes, sir," Clara replied. "It's a lot to learn, but I'm trying my best." Henry nodded. "That's all anyone can ask. I appreciate your effort. More importantly, I appreciate your heart. That matters more than skill sometimes." Clara felt a warmth rise in her chest at his words. Henry had been ill, yes, but he carried himself with quiet dignity and a gentle sense of humor that made the days lighter than she expected. Over the next few hours, she helped him with small tasks, bringing him water, arranging his chair closer to the window so he could see the fields, reading aloud to him when his strength faltered. She discovered a side of herself she hadn't known before, a patient, tender care that wasn't driven by obligation alone. Jed continued to watch over her, often quietly in the background, making sure she wasn't overexerting herself and guiding her when necessary. He never rushed her, but he was always present, a steady figure who radiated competence and reliability. There was something comforting in his presence, something that made the vastness of the ranch feel less intimidating. One afternoon, after a long day of tending horses and feeding cattle, Clara found herself sitting on the porch with Jed. The sky was painted with the soft colors of sunset, and the wind carried a faint smell of grass and earth. She felt exhausted but satisfied, a feeling she hadn't experienced often in her life before. "You're holding up well," Jed said, leaning against the railing. "Most people falter after a week or two, but you seem determined." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I want to do this right. I want to help Henry, and I want to learn." She hesitated, unsure how much to say. "It's harder than I thought, but I think I'm starting to understand why people stay here." Jed nodded slowly, as if he had expected her honesty. "It's not just work. It's a way of life. The land teaches you patience, responsibility, even humility. You learn about yourself when you're here." Clara considered his words. She had spent her life in small-town routines, helping her mother, doing the same tasks every day. But here, every action had consequences, every decision mattered. She felt herself growing, not just physically from the labor, but emotionally, mentally. She was learning resilience, strength, and even the beginnings of hope. Days turned into weeks. Clara's confidence grew as she learned the routines of the ranch. She could feed the horses, check the cattle, and even manage small repairs on the fences. She started to anticipate the needs of the animals and the people around her. She developed a quiet camaraderie with the ranch hands, who no longer regarded her as an outsider, but as a part of the team. Through it all, her bond with Henry deepened. They shared quiet moments, sitting by the window, talking about his youth, the stories of the ranch, and his dreams for the land. He was honest about his illness, never trying to hide the truth from her, and Clara learned to provide comfort without pity. She discovered that true care wasn't about sympathy. It was about presence, listening, and small acts of kindness. Jed, too, became more than a guide. He shared stories of his life on the ranch, of challenges he had faced and overcome, of lessons learned from the land and the people who depended on it. Clara listened with fascination, realizing that Jed's strength was not just in his muscles or his skills, but in his patience, wisdom, and unwavering loyalty. One evening, after a particularly long day, Henry called Clara to his side. "You've done well," he said softly, his voice tired but sincere. I can see the effort you put into this place. You're not here because you have to be, you're here because you care. That matters more than anything." Clara felt a lump in her throat. She had come to the ranch out of obligation, out of necessity, but now she realized she had found something unexpected. A sense of purpose, a reason to give her best, and a connection to people who mattered to her. As the weeks passed, Clara also noticed small moments of quiet humor, subtle gestures of warmth, and unspoken bonds forming between herself, Henry, and Jed. The ranch, which had seemed so intimidating at first, became a place of learning, growth, and even joy. She found herself laughing with the workers, sharing stories with Henry, and appreciating the steady, calm presence of Jed. The most unexpected lesson, perhaps, was discovering the quiet beauty of life on the ranch, the way the morning light hit the fields, the gentle nuzzle of a horse, the sound of wind through the trees. These small details became sources of comfort and wonder. Clara began to feel connected not only to the land but to herself, discovering strength, patience, and resilience she had never known before. By the end of the second month, Clara had transformed. She was no longer the nervous young woman who had arrived uncertain and afraid. She was confident, capable, and beginning to understand her place in the rhythms of the ranch. She had formed meaningful connections, with Henry, who relied on her care and companionship, and with Jed, whose guidance and quiet support had become a steady presence in her life. One late afternoon, as Clara helped Jed repair a broken fence, she paused to look over the fields. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows and bathing the landscape in golden light. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction and belonging. The work had been hard, the learning curve steep, but she had grown stronger, wiser, and more grounded in the life that had once seemed so foreign to her. Jed noticed her pause and smiled. "You're doing well, Clara, more than well, actually. You found your rhythm here, and that's not easy." Clara smiled back, feeling a quiet pride. "I'm learning, and I think I might like it here, even though it's hard, even though it's different." Jed nodded, his expression calm but approving. "That's the spirit. The ranch can be tough, but it rewards those who give it their heart. You've got the heart, Clara." As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Clara realized that life on Dawson Ranch was more than a contract or obligation. It was a journey of learning, of care, of connection, and of growth. She had arrived unsure and anxious, but she was beginning to see that this place could become more than a temporary stop. It could become home. And in the quiet moments, as she watched the sun dip below the hills and the stars begin to emerge, Clara felt a spark of hope. Perhaps the contract had brought her here, but her heart was starting to belong. She had discovered that even in the face of uncertainty and hardship, life could be full of purpose, connection, and quiet joy. The early morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the faint aroma of wildflowers from the distant fields. Clara Reynolds stepped out of the small guest room she had come to call her own and stretched, trying to shake off the lingering fatigue from the previous day's chores. The ranch had grown even busier lately, with the cattle needing more attention and the fences requiring constant repair. Yet there was a heaviness in the air that Clara could feel, even if she could not yet name it. Henry Dawson was not as strong as he once had been. Over the past few weeks, his cough had grown more persistent, and his movements slower. Clara noticed the subtle changes, the way he rested his hand on the arm of his chair longer than before, the way he sometimes lost focus mid-sentence, and the way his eyes, once bright and full of life, held a quiet tiredness. She had come here expecting illness. She had accepted it in theory, but living it day after day was another matter entirely. Jed Harper noticed it too. He had been quiet about it, never bringing it up directly, but Clara could see the concern in his eyes. He moved around the ranch with his usual calm efficiency, but there was a sharpness in his gaze, a constant awareness of Henry's condition that spoke volumes. Clara admired his strength, but she also felt a pang of sadness. It was not easy to watch someone you cared for grow weaker, no matter how graceful their spirit remained. The morning began with the usual chores, but Clara found herself distracted. She fed the horses mechanically, checking each one, but her mind kept drifting back to Henry. She thought about the way he had smiled at her the evening before, the way he had shared stories from his youth, the way he had entrusted her with small tasks that she now handled with care. She realized that her feelings had deepened beyond duty. She genuinely cared for him, not just as the man she had married in a contract, but as a human being who had opened his life to her. After breakfast, Henry called for her. His voice was softer than usual, and Clara's heart skipped a beat as she approached him. "Clara," he said, "come here a moment." He was sitting by the window, the sunlight falling across his face in gentle stripes. "I want to talk to you." Clara knelt beside him, taking his hand in hers. The warmth of his grip was comforting, but there was a fragility in it that made her chest tighten. "Yes, sir," she asked softly. "I won't be around forever," he said, his voice steady but gentle. "I think you know that. The days are shorter, and my body, it does not respond as it once did. But I need you to understand something." Clara's throat tightened. She had anticipated this moment in theory, but hearing the words aloud was far more difficult than she had imagined. "I understand," she whispered. Henry smiled faintly. "You've done more than I could have asked for. You came here under a contract, yes, but you stayed because you cared. I see it in how you move, how you work, how you speak to the people around you. That matters more than any agreement on paper." Clara blinked back tears. I didn't know what to expect when I came here, but I care for you, sir, truly." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "And that's why I want you to listen carefully. When the time comes, I want you to continue. Stay on the ranch if you choose. It's not just land, Clara. It's a place that needs care, and I believe you are capable. Jed will guide you, and the ranch, it will feel like home if you let it." The weight of his words settled over Clara. She had not anticipated this. The thought of staying, of continuing life without Henry was daunting. Yet there was also a spark of hope, a possibility that life could continue, that she could find a purpose beyond the contract and the responsibilities she had taken on. Days turned into weeks, and Henry's condition worsened. Clara found herself taking on more responsibilities, feeding the animals, checking the fences, helping with meals, and attending to Henry's needs. The work was exhausting, but Clara approached it with determination. She refused to let fatigue or fear overwhelm her. Each day she reminded herself that she was here to honor her promise, to care for Henry, and to learn from the life around her. Jed became her constant companion through this difficult time. He was always nearby, offering guidance and support without overstepping. There were moments of quiet conversation as they worked together, moments when Clara shared her fears and doubts, and Jed listened without judgment. He never offered empty reassurances. Instead, he gave her practical advice, encouragement, and the silent strength that came from years of experience on the ranch. One evening, after Henry had gone to bed, Clara and Jed sat on the porch, the sky a deep indigo dotted with stars. The air was cool, and the distant sounds of the ranch were muffled in the quiet night. "You've been carrying a lot," Jed said softly. "It's not easy watching someone fade away, even when you know it's coming, but you're handling it better than most would." Clara sighed, staring at the horizon. "I thought I could prepare myself, but nothing truly prepares you for this. I care for him, Jed, more than I thought possible, and yet I'm terrified of what comes after." Jed nodded slowly. "That's natural. Love and fear often walk together. But you're stronger than you think, Clara. You faced new challenges every day here, and you've grown. When the time comes, you will find a way to carry on." His words offered some comfort, though the fear in her heart remained. Clara knew he was right, but the reality of life without Henry still seemed impossible to imagine. The following week brought a sudden decline in Henry's health. He grew weaker, his cough more persistent and his movements slower. Clara stayed by his side almost constantly, helping him with meals, bringing water, and simply sitting with him when he wanted company. There were moments of quiet laughter when he recounted old stories and moments of deep sadness when he reflected on his life and what he would leave behind. Jed continued to manage the ranch, ensuring that the animals were cared for and that the work continued smoothly. He coordinated with the other workers, assigning tasks and making adjustments to accommodate Henry's condition. Clara watched him carefully, noticing the depth of his responsibility and the quiet dedication that defined his character. She began to rely on him not only for guidance but for emotional support. His presence became a stabilizing force, a reminder that even in the face of sorrow, life could still carry on. One afternoon, Clara sat beside Henry, holding his hand as he looked out at the fields bathed in golden light. "Clara," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I want you to know I have no regrets. You've been a blessing, a light in these final months. And I want you to continue living, truly living, even after I'm gone." Clara felt tears welling in her eyes. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "The thought of not having you here, it's unbearable." Henry smiled faintly, his eyes soft. You must. Life doesn't end with me, Clara. The land, the people, the animals, they all need you. And Jed, he will be there, you're not alone. The words sank into her heart. She realized that Henry's wish was not just for her to survive, but to thrive, to find a purpose beyond her obligations. It was a challenge, yes, but also a gift, a chance to discover strength and resilience she had not known existed. The following days were the hardest yet. Henry's health declined steadily, and Clara found herself stretched thin between caring for him and managing the increasing demands of the ranch. There were moments of doubt, when she wondered if she could continue, moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Yet she pushed through, drawing on the lessons she had learned, the support of Jed, and the quiet determination that had grown within her. One night, as Clara sat in the dim light of the kitchen, preparing a meal for Henry, Jed joined her. "You're doing all you can," he said gently. "Sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's everything." Clara nodded, grateful for his words. I want him to be comfortable. I want these last days to be peaceful for him." "You will give him that," Jed assured her. "And more importantly, you're learning to care for yourself in the process. That's something he would want you to remember." The days continued in this rhythm of care, work, and quiet reflection. Clara grew more attuned to Henry's needs, more confident in her skills on the ranch, and more aware of her own emotional strength. She discovered patience she hadn't known, courage she hadn't realized she possessed, and a quiet resilience that carried her through the most difficult moments. Through it all, the bond between Clara and Jed deepened. It was not yet a matter of love or romance, but of trust, respect, and understanding. Jed's quiet guidance, his calm presence, and his unwavering support became a lifeline. Clara knew that when the time came, when Henry was gone, she would not face the future alone. And yet the thought of that day filled her with sorrow. She had come to care for Henry deeply, and the idea of losing him was almost too painful to bear. She carried the weight of that impending loss silently, drawing strength from the small moments of connection, the gentle smiles, and the quiet laughter they shared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara sat by Henry's bedside, holding his hand. "Thank you," she whispered, "for trusting me, for letting me be here." Henry's eyes glimmered faintly. "You've given me more than I could have asked for. Remember the ranch, the land, the people, they will carry you forward, and so will Jed. Trust in that, Clara." As night fell over the Dawson ranch, Clara felt a mixture of sorrow, fear, and hope. She knew that change was coming, that the days ahead would bring challenges she could not yet imagine. But she also knew that she had grown stronger, more resilient, and more capable than she had believed possible. And in the quiet stillness of the ranch, under the blanket of stars, Clara made a silent promise to herself. She would honor Henry's trust, embrace the life she had been given, and face whatever came next with courage, patience, and an open heart. The morning light filtered gently through the windows, casting a soft glow across the Dawson ranch. Clara Reynolds woke to a stillness that was heavier than usual. She rose quietly, careful not to disturb Henry, though she already sensed that the hours ahead would be difficult. The house was unusually quiet, the usual bustle of the ranch feeling almost muted. Henry had slept fitfully the night before, his breathing uneven and labored. Clara moved to his side, placing a hand gently over his. "Good morning, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Henry's eyes opened faintly, and he managed a weak smile. "Clara," he whispered, his voice soft but deliberate. "It's time to remember what matters." Clara nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had prepared herself as best she could, but no amount of preparation could soften the weight of what was coming. She helped him sit up slightly, adjusting pillows behind his back, and offered him a sip of water. Jed Harper arrived quietly, as always, just as the sun climbed higher into the sky. His presence was steady, calm, and reassuring. He had seen many difficult moments on the ranch, but the care and attention he gave now, both to Henry and to Clara, was filled with quiet empathy. He adjusted the blankets around Henry, checked his comfort, and offered Clara a nod that said, without words, "You are not alone." The morning passed slowly. Clara read to Henry from one of his old books, the stories of ranch life and distant adventures filling the room with gentle familiarity. Henry's breathing grew weaker with each passing hour, but he managed a smile whenever he looked at her. There was a sense of peace in his eyes, a quiet acceptance of the life he had lived and the legacy he would leave behind. Clara felt her heart tighten as she watched him. She had come to love him, not just as the man she had married under a contract, but as a person who had trusted her, shared his life with her, and allowed her to be part of his final days. The thought of losing him was almost unbearable, yet she knew that his time was near, and she wanted to be present to honor him in every way she could. Jed stayed close, offering silent support. He spoke only when necessary, his calm voice guiding her through tasks, offering practical advice, and reminding her that care, patience, and presence were sometimes more important than action. Clara appreciated this quiet strength, realizing that Jed's support was as much a comfort to her as it was to Henry. By midday, Henry's breathing had grown slower, more labored. Clara sat by his side, holding his hand, feeling the warmth of his skin even as his strength waned. She whispered softly, recounting memories of the past weeks, moments of laughter, and the small victories that had made life on the ranch meaningful. Henry's eyes sparkled faintly with recognition, and he managed a small, contented smile. "You've been remarkable, Clara," he whispered, his voice weak but sincere. "I knew the contract would bring you here, but you stayed because of your heart. That's what matters." Tears streamed down Clara's cheeks. "I care for you, sir, more than words can say. You've trusted me, shared your life with me, and I will always remember that." Henry's hand squeezed hers faintly. "I know, and I want you to continue after I'm gone. The ranch, the land, the people, they will need you. Jed will help you. You're not alone." Clara nodded through her tears. "I promise, sir, I will honor your trust. I will care for this place and for the people here." As the afternoon wore on, Henry's breathing grew more labored. The sun cast long shadows across the room, the quiet sounds of the ranch outside a gentle reminder that life continued even as one chapter was coming to an end. Clara remained by his side, her hand in his, her heart heavy with sorrow but filled with determination. When Henry's final moments arrived, they were peaceful. His eyes, once bright and full of life, closed gently, a faint smile lingering on his lips. Clara felt a profound sadness, but also a deep sense of gratitude for the time she had spent with him. She whispered a final goodbye, her tears falling freely. Jed placed a steady hand on her shoulder, offering silent support. "He was fortunate to have you here," he said softly. "And so were we. Now it's your turn to carry on." The following days were a mixture of mourning and adjustment. The ranch, which had been centered around Henry's presence, felt emptier, quieter, yet life continued. Clara found herself learning to manage the routines more independently, checking the animals, tending the fields, and organizing the workers. Jed remained a constant presence, guiding her with patience, offering advice, and allowing her the space to grow into her new role. Clara discovered that her grief could coexist with growth. She honored Henry's memory by caring for the ranch as he would have wanted, but she also learned to find small joys in the rhythm of daily work. The way the morning light hit the fields, the soft nuzzle of a horse, the sound of cattle moving across the land. These moments reminded her that life, even after loss, held beauty and meaning. Over time, Clara and Jed began to work together more closely. It was not a matter of romance at first, but a bond formed out of mutual respect, trust, and shared responsibility. Jed admired her courage and determination, and Clara found comfort in his steady presence. Together, they faced challenges: the repairs of fences damaged in storms, the care of sick animals, and the management of the ranch hands. They learned to rely on each other, to communicate without words, and to trust in one another's judgment. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara and Jed sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the air carried the familiar sense of grass and earth. Clara felt a sense of peace she had not known in weeks. "I never imagined I'd find myself here," she said quietly, her voice thoughtful. "Caring for a ranch, managing the animals, and yet it feels right. Even without him here, the ranch feels like home." Jed nodded, his expression calm but thoughtful. "That's because it is home, Clara. Not because of the contract, not because of obligation, but because you've given yourself to it fully. You've learned, grown, and adapted. That's what makes a place a home, not just walls or land, but heart." Clara smiled faintly. "I've learned so much about myself, about life. And about people, about kindness, patience, and strength." Jed reached over, placing a hand over hers. "You've discovered what many never do. You found purpose, Clara, and you've done it with courage." The days turned into weeks. and Clara continued to grow in confidence and skill. She managed the ranch with Jed's guidance, forming deeper connections with the animals, the land, and the people who worked alongside her. The routines that once seemed overwhelming now provided comfort and structure. She learned to face challenges with calm determination, to take pride in her work, and to embrace the life that had once seemed so uncertain. One morning, as Clara walked through the fields, she noticed the small signs of life continuing: the calves moving across the grass, the horses grazing peacefully, the wind rustling through the trees. It was a reminder that life, despite sorrow, always finds a way forward. She felt a sense of purpose and belonging that she had not known when she first arrived. Clara realized that the contract that had brought her to Dawson Ranch had been only the beginning. What truly mattered was what she had discovered along the way: the strength she had found within herself, the bonds she had formed with Henry, Jed, and the ranch, and the resilience she had developed in the face of loss. She understood now that life was about connection, care, and the courage to continue even when faced with sorrow. Henry's passing had left a void, but it had also opened the door to growth, purpose, and new beginnings. The ranch was no longer just a place of work. It was a place of learning, healing, and belonging. As the sun set on another day at Dawson Ranch, Clara stood on the porch with Jed by her side. The horizon glowed with soft hues of orange and pink, and the air was filled with the familiar sounds of life on the ranch. Clara felt a quiet determination settle in her heart. She would honor Henry's memory by continuing to care for the ranch, by nurturing the land and the animals, and by embracing the life that had unfolded before her. Jed glanced at her, a small smile playing on his lips. "The future is yours, Clara. You've earned it." "And you're not alone." Clara smiled back, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and hope. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she also knew that she was strong enough to face them. She had grown in ways she had never imagined, learned the value of patience, care, and resilience, and discovered that even in the shadow of loss, life could be rich, meaningful, and full of possibility. And as the stars began to twinkle above the fields, Clara felt a sense of peace settle over her. Dawson Ranch, once a place of uncertainty and obligation, had become her home, a place of memory, growth, and new beginnings. She had arrived as a stranger under a contract, but she would stay as a woman who had found purpose, belonging, and hope. In the quiet of that evening, Clara whispered a promise to herself. She would honor Henry's trust, continue the life he had entrusted to her care, and embrace the future with courage, heart, and determination. The ranch would thrive, the land would flourish, and so would she, carrying forward the lessons, the love, and the legacy of the man who had welcomed her into his life. And in that promise, Clara found a sense of completeness, a recognition that life, even after sorrow, held beauty, strength, and the quiet joy of new beginnings.